Good evening all, and welcome to another installment of your favorite program, Difficult Women.
That's right, I'm your host, Lady Anderson.
And I'm your other host, Lady Frame. Lady Frame sounds a lot like Katy Frame, which is...
Lady Frame.
Lady Frame.
Thank you for taking the time to clear your social calendar to join us here at the Difficult Women podcast, where we promise to entertain you and tickle
your fancy.
Yes.
Whatever.
Jesus.
I don't know. We're not made for that time, I guess. But.
Lady Catherine. That sounds way more.
Lady Catherine. That's better.
Lady Catherine. And then I'd be just Miss Marie. I have no social standings.
Yes.
Your father's a duke. Just kidding.
Right.
Well, welcome, guys. I don't know. This is going to be a fun episode.
We're trying something new.
We're trying something new, obviously, with our new theme song. We're now transitioning into just a Bridgerton podcast.
Yeah. Before you turn off your podcast, that's not true. We're just doing an episode.
Katie's like, I would never listen to this.
It's funny. So anyway, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about the time of Bridgerton today and women's place in the world during that time. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's worth mentioning. Marie has, how many times have you seen the entire series now?
Twice now.
Okay, twice. I thought it was like 4. It was like the Titanic.
I did start it a third time. I can't help it. It's
great.
I mean, you don't think the series is great.
I mean, I think it's great. That you think it's great.
That's nice. Thank you. I was listening to NPR talking about Bridgerton, and everybody on it was like, no, I don't like it. And I was like, oh, that's like Katy.
It's not even that I don't like it. I just, it bores me a lot. I get very bored watching it. Because, and this is tied to what we're going to talk about today, but I get bored watching it because so much of that kind of shows, and especially within that society, whatever, it's like, who am I going to marry? Who will I marry? Who am I going to marry? And I know there's like more plot to that than that, but like that's the part that starts to drive me nuts. But as I learned, as we went into some research about that time period, there's a good reason why that's the focus of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that is that it's all they had.
It's all women had back
That's
then.
All they had. So what else are you going to talk about?
All they had. And I wanted to talk about this specifically because, we're romanticizing Bridgerton so much. I'm romanticizing it so much. I love it. I really enjoyed it because, number one, all the sex scenes. I love it. I love watching other people bone. Especially in very fancy costumes. No, I thought it was lovely, and it was it's our horny drama of during the pandemic. It's fabulous. But also, I mean, I think that the story is so romanticized of like the Regency period. 1811 to 1820 is really the time that we're talking about during the Bridgerton era or whatever, mm-hmm. where the show is set. And that time you're like, oh, how lovely, like women are presented into society. How lovely is that? But like,
yeah, the question is why, right? And that's what brings up questions about. But I did appreciate that in the readings that we did before,
oh, but of course,
podcast,
Lady Catherine,
that it sounds like Bridgerton has actually done a pretty good job of being accurate to some degree. Mm-hmm. Right? In like sort of in broad strokes. Mm-hmm. But so I thought that was kind of good. So that there was, some sexual activity during that time period. Maybe not in the way that it happens on that show. I don't know who's having sex on this show because I only got like 3 episodes in it. I saw him like bone a prostitute or something, and I was like, okay, yep.
You gotta keep going, girl.
I know. I gotta.
Oh my God,
watch me in like 3 weeks, and I'm like, oh my God, Bridgerton's the best show ever. Like I totally could see myself flipping on.
Wait till episode 5. Get there, and then you're just giddy up. And
I think also like there's nothing, especially during the pandemic, there's nothing wrong with having just a show that's fun to watch.
Ugh.
You know what I mean? So like I don't want to shit on the show. I think it's great. I think it's a perfect time for it. I'm all about it.
And
haven't gotten into it.
It's a big thing for Shonda Rhimes, and she signed this huge deal with Netflix, and it's it really is like to program more diversity into their programming. and I mean, I think that that's also what is kind of neat with it is that like some people are like, well, obviously they're not sticking with historical accuracy, but actually they are. There was Queen
that's what
Catherine.
I found.
Yeah, she was mixed race, or and she was a German princess and came over and married what was it, King George III, Mad King George.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Too bad for her.
I know.
But worked out. She was a queen. It's cool.
Yeah, she was a queen, and she did great things too, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also, like, I was, you've been taking like some writing classes, and I've been sort of looking into taking writing classes. And with some of the things I've been reading about storytelling, right, especially for like a TV show or a film, is that like it is okay to not have everything be exactly how it worked out. You know what I mean? Because you have to, the number one thing you're trying to do is tell a story that's interesting to watch. So if she were to make it perfectly accurate to that time, no, that's so boring. No one would want to watch that. So I think that there's something fun about playing with that time period and then, but making it, enhancing it in its own ways. And people have been doing that for years. So
it's a full soap opera. It's
and if you have a problem with
fest.
that part of it, then you're watching the wrong show, because it's not like
go on over to
historical.
Outlander and
Exactly.
there's some deep
super historical Outlander. Yeah, the
Totally.
time traveling. Yeah, very accurate. Very accurate. Oh my god, I love it.
Well, let's get into it.
Yeah. Here, you start, because you know more. So the big thing, if you have not watched Bridgerton, or haven't watched much like I have, you do pick up pretty quickly that it sort of centers around this coming out kind of
the social
event.
season.
Yes. So tell me about this, Marie. Explain this social season to me.
The social season, dear. I can't remember exactly when it was, but it's like it's when
like
Parliament,
January to like August.
January to August.
I
Yeah,
could be
because
making that up.
well, I think you're right, because so basically it's the aristocracy, right? These very, very, very wealthy people all live like in the country in their huge castles or mansions or palaces. I don't know what they are. But then for the social season, they all join in London. And I was reading, like, in the summertime when it's super hot and stuff, that's when they all want to go back to their country homes.
Right.
So that's why
it's stinky.
they have, because it smells really bad. And also when they go back to so they all, convene for the social seasons, January through whatever. Summer's really hot and whatever. And they go back to their country homes. And that's when the hunting season begins too.
Which is also social, right? It's
very
just a different
social.
kind of
And it's a wonderful way for a lady to show off her fox hunting skills.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
which
exciting.
is great. So good.
And is it when they come to London,
Yes.
is it that they always present themselves to the Queen?
Yes. Yes, they
So
do.
that is
And
part
so
of it.
this is something too. So I believe, I could be wrong, please send us an email. But I believe that the men are, when they're 18 years old, the men then go on a tour of the continent. Did you know this?
Yes, I did hear about this. I did not know about this before.
Yes,
I
but
read a thing about it.
when a man is of age, they tour the continent. So they go on a year-long trip across Europe and basically probably fuck everything. They go to brothels. But they also are like, I don't know what they would do, but like visit, their Duchess of whatever and go
right, and say hi and do a tour. But then
it's all social networking stuff for the man, and also go visit brothels. Meanwhile, the women, it's up to the families to decide what age. Because I was like, oh, it's 18 when they're presented, and my sister, who's like all well versed on this, she was like, oh no, I think the youngest has been 12. It's when the family decides that the woman is ready to come out. It's really kind of fucked up, but it's like it's really about breeding.
Right, her
but like also,
level of puberty, how far along puberty she is, and like
but also her education. Like they really do pride themselves, especially for the women, like what talents. And so, as we know, when we see in Bridgerton, Daphne is an incredible pianist, and one of her other sisters is a poet and like is always writing, and like I mean they're gosh, I wish we could all just live like that, just like lounging around, eating
learning
scones
piano.
and playing piano. But they know different languages, and I mean, they're very, very well educated. These young ladies.
Well, that was one thing that stood out to me when I was learning about like what's the setup, right? So like they come out to this event. And by the way, you only kind of get one shot at this because like if you leave, and the whole point of this season is to like find a mate, right? That you're like being like, here I am, so come marry me. And if you don't get picked up that season, this sounds like a plot pilot or something that goes wrong. Then if you come back the next season, you're really slim pickings, right? It's like that can be really bad for you. So there's a little bit of pressure on these young women to find a mate as much as they can. Now, as you can imagine, the pool is limited, right? So like imagine being somebody who's like not as good at piano. And then you end up with the like yucky guy because, you know, the other lady was better than you, like that. And then you're married to that person like forever. That's it. That's your person. Right. So I felt like the pressure was like, and then it almost reminded me of like applying to like colleges. Like if anybody out there has like gone through the process of applying to like Ivy League schools and that high level of school stuff, it's like you're competing with like the cream of the crop, right? So it's like the people that have like, they could speak a million languages, they play 5 instruments, they they know about astronomy and, you know, political science, I mean, all the things. And like the more you know, and the more things you have on your resume, then, you know, they believe that that's like a better chance for getting into Princeton or whatever it is. But it's like the expectation of these women to be able to be perfect. I mean, they also have to be like demure, and they have to look good on a horse. That was one of the things that they said. And they have to like, you know, hunt foxes well. Right. Like, what is this? So I just don't even understand. Like it's so much pressure.
Well, it's really interesting you said perfect. I think that like what the expectations of these women of the time was to be perfect and pure. Right. Their virginity was the most important thing. And I think that this is, again, like why we created Reformed Whores. We like to present like the double standards of men versus women, how men can sleep around, but women, heaven forbid, we do the same. We're called whores. But the same thing with this. It's like if a woman of that time was even caught without a chaperone, she was deemed a whore, a slut, a harlot.
Right,
like,
and then going to be in trouble finding a husband.
Yeah. Or they would, you know, you'd have to marry the person that you're walking with, you know, immediately because, you know, I don't know.
You know what I found fascinating about that though, too, is that like, that's all true. And then the question isn't like, then you're like, okay, well, why is their purity so important? And in the one thing I read, they were saying the impurity and like the virginity was especially important amongst the higher class because there was so much at stake in the marriages. So like if you had sex with somebody else and then you had sex with your husband and then you got pregnant and there was any doubt of whose child it was, the heir could either be from this guy's heir or that guy's heir. So your money now is like totally, you know, that guy could lose out on his like inheritance from the queen, you know, from this duchess, because the true heir is actually this like, he's a bastard child and the true heir is whatever, you know what I mean? Right. So it was actually less to do about I mean, yes, of course, it's controlling women's bodies because it's telling you what you can and cannot do. But it was less about like, oh, moral issues and more to do with, at a certain point when it started out, it was more to do with like, if you fuck somebody else, we don't know whose baby you're going to make. And if we don't know whose baby you're going to make, then we can't be sure that baby, this is before genetic testing, you know, so they couldn't do like not the father, you know, it's not one of those things. So I thought that was like especially interesting because then that allowed people of like the lower class to be a little more free to have sex, because if they had a bastard child, nobody cared. Nobody had any money. So it wasn't like they were going to lose money over it. They might lose, you know, especially as, the other thing that strikes me is that like how important a role religion plays and doesn't play during these times, and how there's times where religion gets really intense, where like they really want to crack down on moral stuff. And then there's times during that Georgian time you're talking about, I read that his son, who was basically his proxy as a leader, because George was crazy, the Regency time, Prince Regent of the Regency or whatever, he was pretty loose as a guy. So his reign period, it was kind of a loose period. And then when the next kind of like queen or king or whoever came in, they started being like, well, I believe more in, you know, purity because of God. So then that cracks down like at a different, so maybe then the poor people have to be more careful about boning. But you know what I'm saying though? But it's like, it's not just always about, you know, women's purity in terms of morals. Sometimes it's an economic thing.
Right. Well, it seems so much like a meat market, like showing off a heifer.
Yeah.
But it's so sad. I mean, I have been to a debutante ball here in the South. I was like, I think I was 19 years old. My good friend Ann Summerall invited me to go to Augusta, Georgia, and it was crazy. Each young woman was presented into society. She had two male escorts who her father first, and all the women were dressed in white dresses. Beautiful, you know, like wedding gowns, basically. They all had the same freaking bouquets. And the father walked the daughter down the aisle, like in this ballroom. It's still a huge, huge ballroom. And we were underage drinking, baby. I remember I had 4 glasses of wine that night. It started a fad. I threw up for sure.
Oh, I bet.
But yeah, her father presented her to society, and the two men took her, like she curtsied the deepest curtsy. I thought she wasn't going to be able to get back up. She just popped right back up. And the two men then took her. And then it was like to show that the father was presenting his now, you know, the woman was out. Like the daughter was available for young suitors now. And this was when I was in college. I mean, not too long ago.
Yeah, like 40 years ago. No.
Yeah.
75 years ago when Marie was in college. No.
But debutante is a French word that I did not know this. I learned this today. But debutante means female beginner in French. Right?
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. That sounds right. Sure.
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Amazing. I don't.
Not a linguist.
My French isn't that great. It's fascinating to me that there's remnants of that what do you call it, like that season that
yeah, it's just
that rigmarole. The other thing is, I don't know what to call it. It's like a rigmarole. You go through this thing. What was also fascinating to me was apparently like, so I am watching The Crown.
Ooh, yes.
And I'm loving that show. Another one where like they take some liberties with facts, but overall it's like pretty factual. And that's about like Queen Elizabeth and her reign recently, up until right now. I think they're going through. Anyway, what was fascinating to me was that they even talk about this in The Crown briefly, that she was the one that put an end to that formal coming to London, coming out to the Queen in a debutante way in the form that they had been doing in England. She was the one that stopped it in 1956. That's so late, right? Right. Imagine where people were legitimately looking for husbands at this event. You know what I mean? Until 1956.
Which is
and maybe it was a little bit more of a presentational thing as it got later in time, but I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty intense.
Well, my sister told me that they stopped doing the presentations to the Queen during World War I and World War II. Then they started it back up again. And actually, the Kennedys were presented in court.
Well, what they say in The Crown is that, at least, and again, the facts are a little shady, but basically what they allude to in The Crown was that she was she was a very popular queen, and then she was starting to lose popularity because she started to feel very like removed from the people. And people started to kind of get less interested in the aristocracy and like the whole queen king thing as they became more like grounded, real people. And they just felt like very distant from the crown. And so this guy, like I don't know if he was a politician or just a reporter, but he wrote some like scathing stuff about her, being like, this woman is totally out of touch with people. And then she called him in and was like, what did you say to me? And why did you say that? And he's like, listen, the bottom line is like, people do love you, and you have an opportunity to remain a great, you know, people having people connected to you, but these are the things that you do that make people go like, ugh, we don't want a queen anymore. Mm-hmm. And one of them was that that coming out ceremony. So she got rid of it on his recommendation. So it wasn't even that she was like, we should stop doing this. It was that like people were like, we don't like this, because it makes that the super aristocracy, like rich people, feel so separate from, you know, regular old people. And it makes people feel shitty. And you're like, what is this? Like, I don't want to, you know, why are you so special? Like, get out of here. Yeah.
It's a clear caste system.
Right. And by the 50s, they were like, no more of this.
Well, so when she announced that it was going to be the last one, women were rushing, like the parents were rushing. They apparently rushed 1,400 girls.
Oh my God.
There to London and presented them to the Queen in like two or 3 days. So like she was just like, this is the last one, and then everybody showed up, and she just had to sit
bring
there
in their
and
like 6-year-olds, like, Eric, you're good enough.
Yeah.
Get out here.
But also, my sister was telling me that there was a time where a lot of these aristocrats were losing money. They didn't have enough money. And so they were actually turning to American women, American young girls. And they were called $1 million American princesses. And they still do this today.
I mean, that's maybe why the Kennedys got in there.
Yeah, maybe. But it was just because their dowries were so much larger than the English aristocracies. That's and so but it's interesting too. I mean, just thinking of like what's his name, the redhead and Meghan Markle. It's like to marry an American, but also an actress is kind of like, I don't know. Right. She's Grace Kelly too.
I was gonna say she might as well be a prostitute, right? Because that's what that was one thing they said too, right? That those actresses were loose back then.
Yes, that's
not
true.
That we're not now. We're still loose, but it's a different kind of loose. Well, the other thing that sort of came to mind and you're looking into and whatever is that like, so why is this such a big deal? Why is it so important that people get married? And of course, like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it was so much about financial issues and so much about status, right? So it's like we're going to marry into this duchess's family, or we're going to marry into this, you know, these aristocratical. What is the word? Aristocracies? That's not right. But those families,
rigmarole,
the aristocracy, right? Or like, and keeping it in. They didn't want poor people to come into that.
It was all about breeding. That's where like it's like animal, like livestock, like keeping it pure.
So it was really a lot of times it wasn't about love. It wasn't about whatever. It was just about like technical issues that they needed to take care of and put into place. And the other thing is that like if you, as a woman, you don't have a lot of options. So if you don't find a mate, you're in trouble. I mean, if you're rich, you can kind of figure it out. But even some of this, I think what I was sort of understanding, this could be wrong. Tell me if this is wrong. But it seemed like then some of these sort of traditions, like there was this, you know, this higher level of that happening. And then there seemed to be these more coming out like Jane Austen type people that are like, they're wealthy, but they're not blue bloods. Do you know what I mean? Like they're more like landowners that whatever. It's like the next level down, and there's still this sort of coming out process, and that's the season I think that they partake in. I don't know that they necessarily see the queen, but they like.
I think they would go to like the farm fairs or the
right, and they're still trying to marry themselves. You know, like they're like, okay, we're available now. Maybe more like a debutante thing. And the bottom line was like, it was like about life and death for some women. Like if you could not get married off, what were you going to do? Because there were not a lot of opportunities for women at that period. So that's sort of fascinating to me too, that you're so limited, and then you get stuck with the yucky guy because you don't. I hate that.
Well, something to consider though is that the life expectancy rate was like 40.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
45.
Yeah,
and I mean, and so many women were dying because of childbirth. Also,
yeah, and so many children were dying.
So many children.
Like, you know, but so like it's hard to live.
By 21, I think if you could not, I mean, certainly by 30, you were like an old hag, Spinster, witch, probably. Like they would just like write you off. But even if you weren't, you know, didn't find a suitor the first season, you go back the second season. By the time you're 21 years old, you were an old spinster,
right?
Which
is crazy.
What are we now?
I guess in the grand scheme of things, if your life expectancy is 40, like you're middle aged at 21,
right?
That's just crazy.
Wild.
That's so crazy. The other thing, though, a side note, this week, randomly, even before we knew we were doing this podcast, I don't know if you saw this, it was going around the internet, but apparently the definition of a spinster, specifically a definition of a spinster was a woman who spun, like for fabric and stuff, and she was able to work so much that she was financially independent. So the fact, we talk about this stuff all the time on the pod, but the fact that you've turned that word, this is a positive thing, like a financially independent woman, basically, and it's become this like negative word now to be like, oh, this woman, she's not married. Ugh. It's like, well, actually she's doing fine. She doesn't need to be married. That's why she's not married, because she didn't want to fuck with your whole patriarchal system, bitches.
Right. Well, that's why, I mean, Jane Austen, there's other women during that era that like really thrived because they were like, I'm not participating in this bullshit. I'm just going to do my own thing. I mean, a lot of them had to like, I don't know, that's where it's tricky, where some of the writers were like, they had to say that they were men or, you know, whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, but a little bit by little bit, there were certain like opportunities for some women. Again, I think at a certain education level, though, you know what I mean? I think if you were like, if you were like really low level, nobody cared about you. So, and they needed like maids and things. So I guess you were working, but you're also kind of like stuck to those families in a weird way. You're not independent like you would be if you had money. But that's another interesting point too, is that I never I'm not like a huge Jane Austen fan. I like Sense and Sensibility. I like that story. I've seen like a million versions of it. I've read it. I like that story. But like Emma and stuff, like I just never was like super into that. And you sent me an article about like, you know, was Jane Austen's stories, or do they really reflect like the time period and like how like love was going on in this society, or was it sort of like a romanticized version of it or whatever? And the bigger thing that I took out of that article was just that like you have to put it in context of when those books came out, because of this Regency like era where people are, you know, being presented, and not even just Regency era, but this presentation of women and like chattel or whatever it is, and this expectation that you have to marry so you don't die. The idea then of marrying for love was a really special notion. And that like, that just was, not that it wasn't available, it was available, but it was like, it was a big deal to really, to get that and to want, you know, and need to even like strive for that. So in that sense, like her stories are not just, because sometimes she strikes me a little too of like, who am I going to marry? Who am I going to, and I don't like that. But again, in her case, it's more about like the independent, like being able to choose someone you love and not be like stuck with someone you have to be with.
Lady Catherine, I believe it's called a love match.
A love match.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we all.
A couple years
nowadays,
ago, I was
right?
like, just marry me off. Who cares? But now I'm like, no.
Well, and I think I have a better understanding of why like one remains single as a woman longer now than they used to, because people like, and even in the 50s and 60s, women had to get married or they were gonna die on the street because they needed someone to pay. It wasn't a woman. I mean, even like up to the 50s, the only job you could get in the 50s as a woman was like a secretary. If you're lucky, that's a good job, you know? So like we really, people have a lot of conversations now, like why women don't marry now. It's like, because we don't have to. And we can actually choose who we want. We don't need to. Yeah. And a lot of the guys suck. So it's like hard. You don't want to end up with a yucky guy if you don't have to.
Guy.
You know?
You don't want to end up with an earl with bad teeth, you know?
No, we don't need to. I'm a spinster. I don't need you. I can like spin my own thread. My
Spinster?
Golden, please.
I love that. Maybe I should change my Instagram bio to Spinster.
Well, if anybody ever accuses you of being a spinster, you can be like, thank you. That's so flattering. I appreciate being an independent, strong woman. I'm into it.
Pays for my own shit. Well, the other thing about Jane Austen is she, you know, so many of her stories are about, you know, who are you going to marry? It's like women coming together and gossiping and, you know, I was listening to a podcast the other day about Jane Austen, and they were saying that she wrote from what she knew. She would have never have been alone with gentlemen. She would have never been. Yeah. She wouldn't know what the conversations would be like because she was never allowed to be with a man.
Right.
So she wrote women's perspectives on it. And she happens to be, I mean, Pride and Prejudice is one of my absolute favorite stories.
I do like that story. And I think the other thing that we have to remember too is that like at the time, a lot of people thought like women were dumb, you know, and that they didn't have that you don't talk too much math with a woman because her intellect cannot handle the math equations. And like what she did too, just by being a writer in itself, proved that that's insane, and that a lot of her female characters were smart, you know, interesting women that had something to say. So that in itself is revolutionary at the time to some degree. Can I talk about a book that I do like?
Yes, please.
Harry
Potter?
No, I don't like that book. I only read the one. I love, and this is of around a little later. It's just like I think it came out in the 1860s, but Little Women.
Oh yeah.
I've always been drawn of those kinds of old 1800s books or whatever. That was the only one that really like spoke to me, and I didn't think much about it. Like, why did I like it? But in retrospect, you're like, well, because it has very little to do with men, really. Honestly, the main character, Jo March, is like this guy is like desperate to be with her, and she's like, bitch, please, I'm busy, I'm writing, I'm becoming a spinster. Like, and at the end of the story, she doesn't end up with anybody,
right?
And she's fine, and she doesn't go, oh, I missed my chance. She goes like, oh, all right, I'm starting my life, you know,
right.
And all of the sisters are strong women in different ways. And even Meg, the older one who got married early, like she was the one that did a more traditional life. I think she married for love, and she had a more traditional life, but like it worked, and she, you know, and nobody said it. It was all of it was good. It was all the options were good. Yeah, I love that story.
I did too, and I love the Winona Ryder.
I love all of every version of that movie.
There's three versions right now, right? Because I did see
at least three, I think. I mean, there might be like one from an old, like way back, like the 50s or something.
Well, I think that's the first one.
Okay, maybe it is just three.
And then it's Winona Ryder. And then the
one that just came out.
I saw that one in the theater, and I was disappointed.
I mean, I just loved the story, so I just enjoyed all of it. But and that was a book that was read to me as a kid, and then I continued to read it myself as like, you know, I've read it a million times, and I just like, and I don't know, it's funny how like it's not so different time period, but the topic is interesting. Can I throw one more book out there that I recommend if you out there haven't read it? Less well known, I think, but The Awakening by Kate Chopin. And it was written in, I think it was published in like 1899. So it was right at the end. It was like at the turn of the century where things were becoming more modern and stuff. And like feminism was starting to be like a thing. But I mean, so if it came out in 1899, she probably wrote it earlier, right? It takes place in the United States, but it's very much of this society, you know what I mean? And the expectations, and this woman is dealing with these expectations. And I don't want to say too much about it because the end of that book is the best ending of any book I've ever read in my life, where you're just like, oh, it's like kind of devastating. But for me, I liked it. But the general story is basically about a woman that is like, I don't want to participate in this. And like to write a book like that about the life that was happening at that time, I just was very taken with that. You know, you don't see that a lot. And at that time, I didn't think, I don't know, or I hadn't experienced it. So The Awakening by Kate Chopin, which is a little bit of a resistance to everything we're talking about.
Well, gosh, we've certainly lived our lives in resistance.
I mean, traditional. Yeah, that's probably why I like was drawn to these books as a kid, because I was like,
yeah. I mean, I do remember Little Women, and just my sisters, like we had all these dress up clothes, and we'd always play Little Women, and you know, it was always
that's
so fun
because you had sisters.
Yeah,
that's really fun.
Good. It was very good. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, as you know, if you haven't watched Bridgerton, I'm very proud of myself. I didn't do any spoilers in this episode.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Because that could have been very easy for you, Katy, who hasn't seen it, the whole thing yet, but also for our listeners. But I do think, you know, just keep in mind when watching it, it's just like it's enjoy it. It's just a wonderful, easy to watch type of thing. But like the real truth, and this always happens in history, is that we try to romanticize it and like, you know, especially with like a love match and all that sort of stuff. Like for every love match, there was a woman like being raped by the guy that she didn't want to end up with, but her dad's like basically sold her to
right,
for
right,
him, whatever,
and or was raped by her husband once they got married because that wasn't illegal.
Yes, yep,
So
that wasn't illegal.
This stuff
and
is not great for women,
right
this time.
Right,
Cute shoes, but bad bad life.
Cute shoes, but bad life.
Kind of rough. And then he died at 40.
Yeah. So I mean, just to keep in mind. When you watch
just to ruin the show for you.
Yeah. Well, there's a season 2 coming out, which is really cool.
Oh my God, amazing.
I mean, and also, sorry.
No, I was.
Well, also the fun aspect of it is that like it's like Gossip Girl, but set in like the Regency era, which is
that was another thing that they said. Because if you have watched it, the whole setup is that there's someone writing a gossip column or whatever, and they said that was kind of true.
Yeah,
that they did. So I think that they did do a nice job of keeping some of those historical things. I mean, but you're right. There's something behind
aristocracy. Like people definitely, it's kind of like our celebrity culture or what it was. I don't know what it is right now with the pandemic, but like you just, it's. I mean, I used to buy those Us magazines, and I just want to know what happened to Jennifer and Brad.
Yeah,
but that's lady whistle
when
down
when you don't have much else to do. Gossip is the thing.
Yeah,
love it.
So anyway,
love
it.
Gossip. Love a good gossip. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I totally non-linear. I just really want to talk about this movie, but I just watched last night Promising Young Woman.
Oh, I'm dying to see that.
Do you want my login? I'll send it to you because it's $20. I paid $20 to stream this movie last night, which I was like, what am I doing? But also,
why 20? I guess because it's like it just came out in the theater.
And, yeah,
it's in the theater. Part of me almost wants to just pay for it so that I can support the movie.
Yeah,
just to remind them, like, we like this stuff. Did you like it, or was it horrifying?
I loved it. I thought it was great. Like, I think every woman should watch this movie. Every man should watch it.
Take notes.
Take notes.
And be scared and be a little bit worried.
Just be totally worried. But
be afraid.
It's a really great movie, and Carey Mulligan really is great. So anyway, it's not Bridgerton, but it is something else.
It's probably more up my alley then.
Yeah, definitely.
Love it.
So anyway, well, thanks for letting us talk about Bridgerton for, a little bit.
I learned something. I don't know. That's a period I don't know a lot about, so I'm always interested.
Yeah. Way before the Titanic.
Yeah, yes, it was before the Titanic.
I know the history of the years.
It was before Katy Perry dropped that last album. Can you believe it? That feels so long ago, but honestly, it wasn't that long, I guess.
Oh my gosh. Anyway.
All right. Well, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something. I learned something. Yeah. I don't think you have to watch Bridgerton to get something out of this episode. That's my feeling. Whatever. Tell your friends.
If you have any comments, concerns, questions, anything.
Or additional historical facts that we don't know about that time period that you think is interesting. Oh my God, we'd love to.
Yeah, difficultwomenpodcast@gmail.com. Also,
are you horny now that we've been talking about Bridgerton? Yeah. Well, we got a place for you to go, right?
That's right. Check this out.
Free stuff is awesome, but free stuff to spice up your bedroom is even better.
Select almost any one item for 50% off, and then Adam and Eve loads on the free stuff.
Enter offer code HORIO at checkout and get 10 tantalizing free gifts.
A sexy item for him, a special gift for her, and a third item you'll both enjoy.
And 6 free spicy movies.
Ooh. Plus, free shipping.
That's HORIO, WHOREO, HORIO at adamandeve.com. Yeah, by the way, just side note, if you are horny, I did find, I don't know if you noticed this, there's a link in the article you sent me, Maria, and you guys can Google it, but the porn from that area is fascinating.
Wait, the porn from Bridgerton time?
Yeah. It's all hand drawn.
Oh.
But it's fascinating. So you guys can Google some Regency porn.
Is that what you Googled, Katie?
What? I'm just very lonely. I don't. Yeah, but if your internet goes down, you can just print out this thing. So I didn't have to Google
Carrot the other day. I was like, "Are we going to do this, Carrot?" Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, no.
Just kidding.
Anyway,
quarantine.
Yep.
All right, please, guys, please rate and review our podcast. We're here. We keep doing this every week for you. The least you could do is just
rate and review us.
Rate and review us.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Bye.